in extraordinary fashion. Now, if we look at incomes alone, that, if anything, understates the extraordinary changes or the extraordinary progress that has been taking place. And the average American today is roughly 30 or 40 times even richer than they were in the middle of the 19th century. But imagine going back in time with 50 times higher income. There's a lot of things that you couldn't have bought. Sure, you could have bought more potatoes, but there was no antibiotics, automobiles, refrigerators, microwaves, so on and so forth, right? And the people, ordinary people, could only dream of the lives of the upper classes who had servants to do the most tedious work for them. Today, we all have access to the electric servant in terms of washing machines, dishwashers, electric irons that do a lot of tedious work for us in the home. And if that isn't enough, producing those goods and earning those higher incomes has become a lot more comfortable to us as well. Back in the 19th century, a lot of people worked in mines and factories. Those people working in the mines didn't see sunlight often for days, and often explosions, cave-ins were part of everyday working life. That differs quite substantially from the people today that are able to work in air-conditioned offices. To many of us, the worst thing that can happen is that the coffee machine breaks down. So the past 2 centuries has been an extraordinary upward trend of economic growth and progress. Yet, what did people say at the days of the Industrial Revolution when this extraordinary growth first took off? Well, back in 1844, some clearly marveled about the rise of machines. Benjamin Disraeli, before he became Prime Minister of Britain, published a novel called Coningsby, in which one character is struck by the technological progressiveness of the time, suggesting that surely Manchester would be the most wonderful city of modern times because its vast population of machines. The very same year that Coningsby appeared, Friedrich Engels published his book on the condition of the working classes. And his book was written precisely during a stay in Manchester, and his take of what's going on was very different from that of Benjamin Disraeli. Engels asserted at the time that machines were only used to deprive people of the jobs and livelihoods, and didn't serve the interests, what he called, of the working classes in Britain. Now, Engels, we know, was wrong about the future, because wages did begin to rise steadily beginning in the 1840s. But he was in fact right about the past. For roughly 7 decades in Britain, wages were stagnant. And if we look at other indicators of well-being, such as consumption or heights, what we find is that people spent less on non-essentials in 1850 than they did in 1750, and the cohorts born in 1850 were also shorter than those born in 1750. And it is important to remember that this was also a time of extraordinary social and political upheaval. What began with the adoption of machinery in the factories and ended with the construction of the railroad also ended with the publication of the Communist Manifesto. And economists and historians have long puzzled about why people would willingly participate in the industrialization process if it reduced their utility. The truth is that they didn't. The Luddites, as they were called, rioted against the mechanized factory. They petitioned to Parliament to block the spread of machinery, and they expressed their attitudes towards technological progress in verse like the following one. Today, levels of income inequality are approaching levels not seen since the Industrial Revolution. If you look at the trajectory of the Gini coefficient, you can see this both in the United States and America, and indeed also in other advanced economies. And obviously, the driver of this is not spinning machines. This time around, computerization is the driver of much of the income disparities that we're seeing across the industrial West today. Every new computer technology since the 1940s have essentially constituted a cheaper substitute to human labor than its predecessors. But computers for a long time were too bulky and expensive to be adopted on a wider scale. Computerization essentially took off in the 1980s with the invention of the personal computer, which were adopted on broader scale in the workplace. And we can see its impact on the labor market if we look to the trajectories of output per capita growth and wage growth, which decoupled beginning in the 1980s. From that point onward, technological progress served to replace workers in existing tasks rather than augmenting them and creating new tasks for them. And this has been particularly evident when you look at the wages of prime-aged men who would have taken on jobs in the factories before the dawn of automation. For all the talk about inequality, the greatest concern is actually that the wages of prime-aged men have fallen for 3 consecutive decades as employment opportunities for semi-skilled workers have dried up. And we can see this also across the industrial West when we look at the disappearance of middle-income jobs. It is a pattern that across the industrial West, routine rule-based jobs that can easily be specified in computer code and therefore readily automated have vanished. But on the other hand, we've seen new jobs being created in technology sectors and professional services when people benefit from computer technologies, right? For me, for example, as an economist, I'm now able to use statistical software to be able to write more papers than I could have done a generation ago. So a key feature of technological progress over the past 3 decades has been the automation of middle-income jobs, which are intensive in routine rule-based activities that can be specified in computer code and therefore readily automated. And at the same time as those jobs have vanished, we've seen the creation of new technology jobs in software, in biotechnology, and also in professional services. And what happens is that if you create a skilled job in the technology sector in a city like Oxford, that person goes out in the local service economy, spends his or her money on services, which in turn creates a lot of new jobs in the local service economy as people go to the hairdresser, go grocery shopping, take a taxi, and so on and so forth. And this has led to this hollowing out of the labor market that we are also familiar with today. The point, though, is that while this has been going on for 2 to 3 decades, we have seen nothing yet. Recent advances in technology, and in particular in the field of artificial intelligence and mobile robotics, means that the potential scope and the potential set of tasks that machines can substitute for workers in has expanded enormously. Instead of now having one computer programmer needing to program top-down exactly what the computer should do at any given contingency, we can essentially feed the machine the data, which